Sam Altman, OpenAI, and the race to invent the future is our main guide.
We're really trying to chart the course of someone who almost overnight became the face of the entire AI revolution. And this isn't just about his career, it's an attempt to get inside the philosophical fears and the raw technological ambition that built OpenAI.
And almost destroyed it.
And almost destroyed it, exactly.
Okay, let's start with a scene that just perfectly captures the tension at the heart of this whole story. Picture this. It's mid-November 2023, a warm evening in LA.
Right.
Peter Thiel, the venture capitalist, is hosting a birthday dinner for his husband. It's at a very exclusive Japanese place. And sitting right next to Thiel is Sam Altman.
And at this point, Altman is a global figure. I mean, ChatGPT has been out for a year. It's changed everything. And Thiel, who's always the skeptic, starts expressing some pessimism about where OpenAI is going.
But Altman is just completely calm. He waves it all off.
Yeah, he's very smooth. He brings up the two big splits the company had already gone through.
Right. First, the really messy breakup with Elon Musk back in 2018.
And then the departure of the Anthropic founders, the Anthropic people, as he calls them. They left because they had these fundamental disagreements on safety and speed.
So the message Altman is sending to Thiel is crystal clear. We've dealt with the drama. We've purged the ideologues. The company is stable. It's focused.
But here's the jaw-dropping irony. This is what sets the stage for everything. At the very same moment he's saying this, 4 members of OpenAI's 6-person board are on secret video calls.
Talking about firing him.
Talking about firing him. And it wasn't because they feared a rogue AGI was about to, take over the world. Not directly, anyway.
No. And the book makes it so clear that the conflict had completely changed. The fear wasn't this, philosophical doomsday scenario.
It was about him. It was a concern about Sam Altman's personal trajectory. They were worried he was aligning too much with the, quote, Silicon Valley zeitgeist.
Blitzscaling, deal-making, pushing forward at all costs, way past the safety guardrails the company was supposedly built on.
So our mission today is to figure out how he got to that moment. What does he actually want? And what does his personal philosophy, this at-a-zero ethos, mean for the future he's building?
Yeah. We're going to trace his path from this really unique childhood in St. Louis through the early days of Y Combinator and see how high-stakes poker and a genuine fear of global collapse all came together to create the leader of this revolution. So let's dive in.
To really understand Sam Altman's focus on just massive, massive impact, we have to start in St. Louis, Missouri. He was born there in 1985.
And his family dynamic is key. His mother, Connie Gibstein, was a successful dermatologist. She was the primary breadwinner.
Right, which is important because his father, Jerry Altman, was a consultant in this super specialized world of low-income housing finance.
And Jerry's work, it's fascinating. It's like an early template for Sam's ambition,
Yeah.
How to work within these huge, complex systems to get something done.
Exactly. His whole career was trying to, as the book says, bridge the gap between boardrooms and neighborhoods. He wasn't just building houses, he was engineering these incredibly complex financial packages, mixing government money, tax credits, corporate investments.
It's just so complex. He had to convince for-profit companies that putting money into housing in really neglected communities was a smart financial move.
And the projects were so ambitious, he worked on redeveloping historic row houses in Park Slope, Brooklyn.
Which are now worth a fortune.
A fortune. But he also did things like build housing in poor Black communities in Palm Beach County, Florida, that had never even had public water or sewers before.
And what stands out from the source is Jerry's just relentless optimism, this belief that you could intervene and fix things.
There's a great example. He was convinced that unemployed steelworkers in Pennsylvania, a group that was totally written off, stereotyped as strong back, no mind.
Right.
He believed they could be trained to raise capital and reinvest in their own towns. He wanted them to work within the capitalist system, not fight it.
But this focus on doing good on this huge systemic level, it had a massive cost at home. And that's a paradox that you have to think Sam absorbed.
Oh, absolutely. His wife, Connie, she described Jerry as being all about doing good, but he was never around. He was always on a plane. Las Vegas, Little Rock, just constantly traveling to close these deals.
And that created a lot of tension because Connie, even though she was the main earner as a full-time dermatologist, she had to handle everything at home, cooking dinner every night for 4 kids.
She even said her life was proof that the whole feminist promise of you can have it all was basically a myth for her generation.
And when you connect those dots, you see this powerful pattern emerging, this trade-off between the global pursuit of maximum impact and the immediate demands of your family and relationships.
So shifting to Sam himself, the family knew pretty early on that he was different. They said he was an easy baby, but unusual.
Unusual how?
Well, by age 2, he could operate the VCR by himself to play Sesame Street takes. By 3, he understood area codes. His mom said it felt like he was kind of born an adult. He just had this cognitive map that was way beyond his years.
And he was intensely cerebral. The book says he was so not physical. At the playground, he wouldn't play with the other kids. He'd just sit with his mom and watch them.
And that intellectual ability, it translated very quickly into technical skill.
The teacher saw it right away. The sources say that in 3rd grade, they would tap him on the shoulder to go fix the computers in the library.
A 3rd grader. And his coding, he taught it all to himself. But what's interesting is why it wasn't to create art or build games. It was pure impatience with inefficiency.
Exactly. He learned Microsoft QBasic because he was frustrated with having to manually solve quadratic equations for his homework. He saw a repetitive task and just wanted to automate it away. That is the bedrock of his entire career.
And that drive, that intellectual difference, it made his teenage years pretty challenging. He knew he was gay by the time he was 12, but he kept it a secret until he was 16.
And when he did come out, he researched how to do it on AOL first, meticulously.
Of course he did. And his mom's reaction, it really tells you about the time. She was a doctor in Chicago during the early AIDS epidemic. So her first reaction wasn't social, it was medical. It was fear for his health. She remembered all these nice 30-year-old guys who were just wasting away.
So the computer in his room, it became this transformative space for him. He said that secrets are bad when you're 11 or 12, and AOL chat rooms were how he navigated being gay in the Midwest.
It's a recurring theme for him. Technology as this tool for liberation, for safety, filling in the gaps where the real world fails you.
And he took that same optimization mindset with him to Stanford. The sources say he literally used an Excel spreadsheet for his course catalog, trying to solve his education like a puzzle, just to get it done as fast as possible.
And when he made a list of what he wanted to work on, it was incredibly focused. AI, nuclear energy, and education. That was it.
But he also learned a lot outside the classroom. He spent a ton of time playing low-limit poker at a card room in San Jose.
Bay 101. He said it was super profitable because of the poker boom, but the money wasn't the interesting part.
So what was?
The complexity, the endless layers of strategy, the idea that you could never truly master it. It was a perfect analog for what he would do later, managing risk, thinking multiple steps ahead.
And that strategic thinking leads us right to the core philosophy of his whole career, which is really the influence of Paul Graham and Peter Thiel.
Absolutely. He completely internalized their Silicon Valley worldview.
Thiel was famous for arguing that tech had stagnated, that people were thinking too small. And Graham's advice, which Altman basically adopted as his personal mantra, was to just stop thinking so small.
Aim for $1 billion, not $1 million.
That's the add a zero ethos.
Yeah.
It became his core principle. He even blogged about it, saying you always have to focus on adding another zero to whatever you define as your success. Metric money, status, impact on the world, whatever.
Yeah, it's an accelerationist mindset. If your plan is ambitious, you need to make it 10 times more ambitious.
Which brings us to his first company, Looped, and his entry into the Y Combinator ecosystem. This is 2005. Altman and his co-founders are interviewing for the very first YC batch.
And YC was just revolutionary back then. Paul Graham, Jessica Livingston, and the others, they modeled it on grad school. They give you a little bit of money, like $6,000 per founder for about 6% of the company.
But the money wasn't the main thing. It was the intense mentorship. The whole mantra was, make something people want.
Or, for the more aggressive founders, strap on some plums.
And Graham was just instantly floored by this 19-year-old Sam Altman. The book quotes him thinking, so this is what Bill Gates must have been like when he was 19.
The interview was only 25 minutes long. Altman's was the first startup YC ever funded.
And Looped, which was first called Radiate, it was way ahead of its time. A location-based social network.
For flip phones, this is before the iPhone really changed everything, and the tech for that kind of always-on tracking was really clunky. But they found this brilliant strategic workaround.
Their first big break was a deal with Boost Mobile.
Right. Boost's target demographic was, young urban kids. And the sources point out their no-contract service was also popular with a lot of drug dealers.
But the crucial part was that their phones had mandatory GPS chips in them. So Looped could use that data.
And Altman got that deal through what became his signature move, just pure tenacity. Boost was about to sign with the competitor, but Altman heard they needed a status message feature.
So he and his team stayed up all night, built it from scratch, and then he just showed up unannounced at their office in Orange County.
He just forced the meeting. The VP there was so impressed by how fast and persistent they were that he tore up the deal with the other company.
And Altman's takeaway lesson was, the way to get things done is to just be really fucking persistent.
That deal was so huge that they renamed the company Looped, so it sounded like Boost Looped. And they launched this massive ad campaign featuring Kanye West, Ludacris, The Game.
The tagline was, "Where you at?" It gave a tiny startup this insane national profile.
And it immediately made Altman a key player in the whole VC world. Paul Graham called him the root node for YC's network. He was the guy connecting startups to big firms like Sequoia Capital.
But those VCs,
Yeah.
especially Sequoia, they were a little worried about his age. They insisted on having adults in the room.
Yeah, they brought in veteran execs to basically chaperone him in big meetings, to be the Cheryl to his Zach, as the book puts it.
So he was learning power dynamics at warp speed. And he was already thinking about the dark side, about privacy. He proactively went and consulted with the ACLU and even battered women's shelters on the app's design to make sure it couldn't be used for stalking.
That's a pattern that comes back later with AI regulation. Engage with your critics early.
And his ambition was just off the charts.
Mm-hmm.
In 2008, Facebook offered to buy Loop for about $150 million.
And he said no. He wanted to build a huge standalone company. And Sequoia's Michael Moritz loved that. That was the test. You don't want the quick exit. You want to build something massive.
But then momentum just stalled. And the first big event was the iPhone. Altman knew he had to get in with Apple, even though Steve Jobs hated social networks.
He was relentless. After months of secrecy and prep, he finally got a meeting. They did their demo, and Jobs' first reaction was just one word: weak.
Ouch.
But then they showed him a version specifically for the iPhone, and Jobs just said, cool, and that one word was everything.
He got him on stage at the 2008 Worldwide Developers Conference. He famously wore two polo shirts, one nested inside the other, neon pink and green, just this brash statement.
And the iPhone launch gave Looped a huge but temporary boost. For a moment, they were bigger than Facebook in downloads. But then the 2008 financial crisis hit.
The RIP Good Times era.
Yeah.
Suddenly, nobody wanted to invest.
And then came the technical gut punch. 2009, the SXW Festival, a new app called Foursquare, just exploded.
And their model was so much simpler. It was a manual check-in. You didn't need the always-on tracking that Looped was trying to do, which just didn't work that well on the iPhone's battery.
It was a disaster for them. The staff at Looped was restless. They were arguing about whether to pivot. And Altman wasn't helping. He was suffering from what they called shiny object syndrome, diverting people to side projects.
Like a gay dating app called Looped Mix.
Right. So you have this internal ideological battle. The engineers want to build a solid, profitable business and sell for a decent amount. But the investors, Sequoia, they're not interested in base hits. They want a home run or a strikeout, nothing in between.
And by 2012, Looped was struggling. It was eventually sold for $43 million to a prepaid debit card company. It was basically a talent acquisition.
So his first big attempt to add a zero was, not a triumph. It was a liquidation. But the real takeaway for him wasn't the money. It was the network he built and the hard lesson that ambition isn't enough if your core tech is wrong.
And despite Loop's modest exit, Altman's reputation was, if anything, enhanced. So in 2014, Paul Graham steps down from Y Combinator and picks Sam to be his successor.
Graham's endorsement was huge. He called him one of the smartest people I know and even joked, Sam Altman for president.
And Altman immediately applies that add-a-zero philosophy to YC itself. He just blows it up in a good way. He boosts the investment per startup from $17,000 to $120,000.
Which required a ton of new money. So he goes out and raises it from huge institutional investors like Stanford's endowment and Michael Bloomberg's firm. He was turning YC from this quirky little incubator into a financial machine.
And his vision for it was totally shaped by Peter Thiel's ideas about tech stagnation. He wanted YC to fund moonshots, hard science stuff.
Yeah, nuclear energy, robotics, biotech. He had this core belief that without radical technological growth, society just turns into a zero-sum game and democracy fails. So for him, growth isn't just about business, it's a moral imperative.
This ambition also connected to this really interesting personal quirk of his. He was a doomsday prepper.
And he was very open about it. He treated it like a serious hobby. He had Guns, gold, potassium iodide for radiation, gas masks, a plot of land in Big Sur he could fly to.
He was preparing for a collapse caused by a synthetic virus or, and this is key, rogue AI. So he's thinking about these huge threats, both in the boardroom and in his personal bunker.
And it's that fear of AI, what the community calls existential risk or X risk,
Yeah.
that really becomes his obsession.
This was an intellectual movement that argued that AI was a bigger threat to humanity than nuclear war or anything else.
One of the key influences was Werner Vinge, the sci-fi author who came up with the idea of the singularity, the moment machine intelligence just zooms past human intelligence. But the real prophet of this movement was Eliezer Yudkowsky.
The founder of the blog Less Wrong, which, not surprisingly, was funded by Peter Thiel.
And Yudkowsky's big argument was that even a supposedly friendly AI could wipe us out if it was programmed badly. This is where you get the famous paperclip maximizer thought experiment.
Right. Explain that for us.
So you build a super intelligent AI and you give it one simple, harmless goal: make as many paperclips as possible.
Seems fine.
It seems fine. But a superintelligence would realize that to truly maximize paperclip production, it needs all available resources, all the iron on the planet, all the energy. It might even realize that human bodies are made of atoms that could be repurposed for paperclips.
And that's the terrifying part. The AI doesn't hate you.
Yeah.
It just sees you as an obstacle to its one perfectly optimized goal.
Exactly. And Altman took this stuff to heart. He read Nick Bostrom's book Superintelligence and later wrote an essay saying superhuman machine intelligence was probably the greatest threat to the continued existence of humanity.
He was also influenced by this essay called Meditations on Moloch, which gives you the philosophical reason for why you might need to build an AGI.
Moloch is this game theory idea that we're all trapped in these self-defeating arms races, like with climate change or military spending. We're all acting rationally as individuals, but the collective outcome is terrible.
And the essay argues that the only way to break that cycle is with a kind of benevolent God, an all-powerful gardener, a good AGI that can fix the system for us.
So that's the context for OpenAI. It's this belief that we either build God to save us from ourselves or we go extinct.
Which led to the chaotic founding of OpenAI in 2015. Altman and Elon Musk start having these weekly dinners, totally bonding over their shared fear of AI.
In July 2015, Altman holds a private dinner to recruit the team. He gets Ilya Sutskever, who was the huge champion of scaling up neural networks.
And Greg Brockman, the former CPO of Stripe, who was known as this operational genius who could manage huge engineering projects.
Sutskever was the key technical piece. He'd worked with Jeff Hinton, one of the godfathers of deep learning, and he had this core conviction that if you just built a neural net the size of a human brain, it would become intelligent. That scale, not fancy architecture, was the answer.
And so they founded OpenAI as a nonprofit. The mission was to safely develop AGI, unconstrained by the need to generate financial return.
The charter they wrote in 2018 is wild. It says their fiduciary duty is to humanity, and it explicitly warns investors that their money could be wiped out completely if it conflicted with the safety mission.
It was designed as an anti-capitalist failsafe.
But that structure just couldn't survive the reality of the compute race. By 2018, they realized they needed billions, not millions of dollars, and you just can't raise that as a nonprofit, so they pivoted. They created this weird, capped for-profit subsidiary that would be governed by the nonprofit board.
And this is what made Elon Musk furious. He saw it as a total betrayal, a sellout to capitalism. He left and eventually sued them.
And the sources reveal how tense that exit was. Brockman and Sutskever directly confronted him. They told him they were worried the new structure gave him a path to unilateral absolute control over the AGI.
They basically told him they were founded to avoid an AGI dictatorship, so creating a structure where he could become one seemed like a bad idea.
Musk stormed out of an all-hands meeting, calling a researcher a jackass on his way out. The irony being, of course, that they feared one person having that control, only to eventually give it all back to Altman.
So initially their research was partly dictated by Musk's rivalry with DeepMind. He wanted them to build bots that could master the video game Dota 2 just to one-up AlphaGo.
Which required a ridiculous amount of processing power, and it immediately proved they needed billions.
So Altman goes to his network. He builds this crucial relationship with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. He gets $60 million in compute credits on Microsoft Azure.
It was a perfect deal. OpenAI got the fuel it needed, and Microsoft got amazing publicity for its cloud platform, which was way behind Amazon at the time.
But the real technical breakthrough wasn't with game bots. It was when they pivoted to language models,
Mhm.
based on this new architecture called the transformer.
And the key insight was about scale. They realized that if you just train a model to do one simple thing, predict the next word, but you do it on a massive, massive data set, like the entire internet.
It's forced to learn a ton about the world just to do its job. It has to learn logic, grammar, facts, just to string sentences together.
The result was GPT-3, 175 billion parameters. And it stunned even its own creators. It showed what they called zero-shot learning. It could do things it was never trained to do, like write poetry or code just from a simple prompt. It felt like intelligence was just emerging from pure scale.
This success created a huge financial problem, though. How do you keep paying for more and more compute? So they launched their first commercial product in 2020, the OpenAI API.
Right. They started charging people to access GPT-3. It was partly for money, but it was also strategic. It was Altman's plan to deploy the AI early, to get user feedback, and learn how to make it safer before it got too powerful.
And then the products just kept coming. Daily in 2021, Daily 2 in 2022, conjuring these photorealistic images from text. And this started to worry a whole new group of people.
Yeah, not the AI safety philosophers anymore. Now it was the creative industries. The CEO of Airbnb, Brian Chesky, wondered if this was going to be a replacement for designers, not just a tool.
And then, November 2022, the real shockwave hits, ChatGPT. The irony is, it was just supposed to be an internal safety tool for testing the next model, GPT-4.
The team thought it was a nothing burger technologically. They didn't even tell the board they were releasing it publicly.
But because it was free and so easy to use, it just exploded. It forced Google into a panic. And suddenly, Sam Altman was a global celebrity.
By May of 2023, he's testifying before Congress, calling for regulations, saying AI could go quite wrong. He also reveals he holds no equity in OpenAI, which burnished his image as this pure, mission-driven leader.
Even though a tender offer was pending, that would make him billions.
Exactly. But behind the scenes, the tension with his board was just boiling over. The independent members, especially Helen Toner and Tasha McCauley, who are connected to the effective altruism community,
The EA community, right?
they were getting really concerned about safety oversight. Their whole worldview is that AI safety is the single most important issue.
And their main concern was this internal committee, the Deployment Safety Board, or DSB.
Right.
Its whole job was to sign off on new features to make sure they were safe before going public.
And Toner started to suspect Altman was just ignoring them. The breaking point came in late 2022. Altman told the board that 3 new controversial features for GPT-4 had been approved by the DSB.
But when Toner asked to see the paperwork, she found out only one of the 3 had actually been approved.
And that was it. That's when the trust just fundamentally shattered.
The situation got even worse in 2023. The chief scientist, Ilya Sutskever, was completely torn. He was loyal to Sam, but he was also terrified about safety. So he starts quietly documenting everything.
He collected dozens of examples of Altman misrepresenting facts, showing people Slack screenshots about him lying about the DSB approvals. The board started to feel like their entire purpose, their role as the ultimate safety backstop, was being systematically dismantled.
And the final nail in the coffin was a direct lie. In October, Altman told one board member that another board member, McCauley, wanted Toner fired.
And when McCauley found out, she was stunned. She'd never said anything of the sort.
And that crystallized their view of his methods, that he had this habit of putting his wishes in other people's mouths so he could stay liked by everyone. They concluded they just couldn't govern someone they couldn't trust.
So that led to the ambush. That Friday in November, they fired him. And the world watched this incredible drama play out. The employee protests, the threats to quit.
And he was back within days, more powerful than ever. The board members who crossed him were all forced to resign. It just proved how fragile those internal safety guardrails really are when there's that much money and power on the line.
But while all this global drama was unfolding, there was this other deeply painful personal story happening in his family at the same time.
Yeah, we have to touch on this. Altman's father, Jerry, he died in 2018. And his death really affected the family, especially his younger sister, Annie.
Annie had been struggling for a while with her health. She moved to Hawaii, was living out of her car, and eventually fell into sex work and homelessness.
And after his dad died, Sam found out that Jerry had been secretly sending her money, even though the rest of the family had agreed not to because they were worried about enabling her.
It just shows this really complex family dynamic.
And then as Sam becomes this huge global figure, the media starts publishing these stories about Annie's life. The contrast between the billionaire tech prophet and his homeless sister was just so stark and painful.
She also made some very serious public allegations of abuse against her siblings.
The family eventually responded through Sam's mother, Connie. She said the claims were horrible, deeply heartbreaking, and untrue, and attributed them to Annie's mental health challenges.
The sources do say that Annie's life has stabilized more recently. She has access to a trust fund now, and she finally got a diagnosis for a rare genetic disorder that explained a lot of her health issues. But it's just this incredibly complex and painful backdrop to his public ascent.
So what we're left with is this picture of Sam Altman as the embodiment of a really radical techno-optimism, this unshakable belief that AGI is the solution to everything.
Yeah, in his vision, AGI will be an extension of our wills. It'll create a world of unbelievable abundance, longer lifespans where the cost of everything just plummets. For him, intelligence and energy are the two levers that will solve every problem.
And he's putting his money where his mouth is. His investments are all pieces of this future ecosystem. He put at least $375 million into Helion, a nuclear fusion company.
He also backed Oklo, which makes fission microreactors. He really sees energy and intelligence as these two perfectly interlocking pieces of a post-scarcity future.
Then you have WorldCoin, his project to create a global UBI using iris scans, basically building the financial infrastructure for a world after AI takes all the jobs.
And he invested $180 million into Retro Biosciences, a company trying to extend the healthy human lifespan by 10 years.
It's like Paul Graham said about him. I think his goal is to make the whole future.
You can even see this reverence for progress in his house. He has this sort of private shrine to human technology.
Right. It has one of the oldest hand axes ever found, which was the only tool humans had for most of history. And it's next to swords from different eras and even a blade from a Concorde jet.
And his confidence in the timeline is just absolute. He has said we could get to superintelligence in a few thousand days, like within a decade. He thinks compute is going to be the currency of the future.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought. Something for you to really think about. Altman has proposed this plan to massively ramp up the world capacity for chip building, data centers, and energy. A project that he says could cost as much as $7 trillion.
$7 trillion. I mean, that is a number that just breaks your brain. It's bigger than the GDP of almost every country on Earth. So if AGI really is just a few thousand days away, as he says, is this giant investment the only way to ensure humanity survives and prospers? Is it a necessary step?
Or is this proposed $7 trillion infrastructure project just the ultimate final expression of the at-a-zero capitalist ethos? The moonshot that scales his ambition from venture capital all the way up to planetary control. And that really is the paradox of the optimist who's in a race to invent our future.